Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and book lovers alike. It is my pleasure today to welcome you all to this special event, the official book launch of Mountain Goddesses by Manu Khajuria Singh. Not, not only is this event special because we have an amazing book to talk about today, but there's something else as well. This is the inaugural event of Elephant Editions. And who are Elephant Editions, you may ask? Elephant Editions is a new, independent publishing house that's not profit, that has developed after years of discussions and partnerships and collaborations with various authors. But why? Why do we need more publishing house? Well, we noticed, though the publishing industry has become more and more aware, let's say, with increasing representation in various spheres of society, and in different backgrounds, it wasn't doing enough. It wasn't doing enough to promote and project actual diversity of ideas and expansion of thought. We're here today on a mission to find the most compelling ideas and stories and compete in the publishing world. Now, as you all know, Manu is a celebrated author whose previous work has garnered critical acclaim and captivated audiences all around the globe. Her book, Mountain Goddesses, is no exception, as it follows her through her discovery of deep-rooted feminism and power within her motherland in Jammu, which is northern India, which has a rich heritage of folklore. Now, if writing a book wasn't enough, a small task, right? Manu is also the founder of the Voice of Dogras, a community organization which supports and promotes the Jammu region's unique ability, culture, history, and people. A Lady Shri Ram College and Tata Institute of Social Sciences alumna, she was awarded the Maharaja Gulab Singh Memorial Award in 2019, a prestigious state honor, and she was also felicitated by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Twitter India, and Breakthrough India with Web Wonder Woman Award. Just wow. Now, to help us delve deeper into the book's themes and ideas and uncover the creative process behind the book's creation, we have Vidhu Sharma, an editor and creative strategist working closely with the Tattva and Elephant Editions teams on upskilling writers and supporting their publishing journey. She's also co-editing and overseeing Beyond the Bindi, an anthology featuring writings from 50 authors on the topic of femininity and womanhood, a project that Manu is also involved in. This discussion will be followed by a Q&A. Over to you guys, where you, the audience, will have the opportunity to ask Manu and Vidhu any questions you may have had about the book or the work. So, as not to steal thunder from today's incredible discussion and the reason why you're all here tonight, I'd like to welcome Manu and Vidhu to the stage.
So much, Manu, for joining us for this discussion today. How does it feel seeing your audience at your first official book launch for Mountain Goddesses?
Definitely feels surreal, but extremely grateful. And on such an auspicious occasion of Ram Navami and the Navami for the Chaitra Navratras, so couldn't have been a better day for my dream to come true. So thank you to Elephant Editions, as well as everybody who's taken out time and come here today.
So let's start with, this is such a big topic, femininity, such a pertinent mainstream discussion. There's so many different ideas involved, and we're always constantly hearing about female-centric voices, empowerment. Why was this an important topic for you? And also, a loaded question, what are you bringing that is fresh to this conversation in this Western mainstream conversation?
Well, the subject was quite close to my heart, and the reason for falling very easily for this particular subject and picking it up were, I think the reasons were A, my identity, and secondly, my role. So when I say identity, my identity as a woman, of course, so my gender identity. I was looking for female icons within my own literature, my own dharmic literature, whom I could relate to better. And my identity as a Hindu, because the kind of icons I had grown up, and though I grew up in India and I studied there, we all know, those who have studied in India, our education system was still in that, colonial hangover it still had. So didn't hear of many icons from within the Hindu literature, the Vedic literature. So that was my second reason. And my third identity as somebody from Jammu and Kashmir, a Dogra woman. And Dogras, and especially Jammu Pradesh, the Jammu region, is known for its warriors. So it's a land where you grow up hearing the stories of the greatest of warriors who've fought in these mountain warfares. So within that, where did the women stand? What was their role in the society? What was their position in the society, especially, I think, was like, that was my identity bit, looking for answers for that. And then role, I would say, of course, the usual role of a wife and a daughter or a daughter-in-law, when you start asking yourself, what is my dharma? What is my duty? Where can I get these answers from? And that of a mother especially, because these stories, women, very strong, empowered women, the very concept of Shakti, I wanted to pass it on to my children as well, so that they don't have to spend a lot of time seeking these kind of answers. So that's why this subject, that is why, mountain goddesses and women, this is where it came from.
And the research that you've done, looking at scripture, listening to stories, undertaking these interviews, translating that oral tradition of passing these stories down, you've not only made that accessible now to your children, you made it accessible to all of us here today and future generations. So in many ways, thank you for undertaking that enormous task of doing that research and documenting it. It might strike you that Manu comes across as very confident, and she's a community activist, she's the founder of Voice of Dogras, and not just activism in her Indian identity sense. She tells, and I will ask you later on in the conversation, she's told me in the past about how her activism even extends to her local area here in London, and fighting for even greater bus routes and things like that. But I'd like to ask you about your miraculous birth story, which is what you start the book with, because I think that in itself is so indicative of where your confidence comes from. That first chapter of the book is Daughter of Durga, and your whole birth story is really heavily associated with Ma Durga. So can you just tell the audience a little bit about that miraculous story?
Yeah, it's a very personal story, but I've chosen to sort of write about it in the book, mainly because I think I also wanted to refer to as our home environment, our learnt behavior. Of course, I come from a family which has been practicing Hinduism from many generations. And my story of birth, as I was told when I was in my teenage years, was that my mother actually conceived 5 times before me, and she gave birth to 5. She had 5 stillbirths, and all of these 5 were actually male. And then, after having tried everything that science could provide for, my father, who was a man of science, an engineer, my mother also very scientific temperament, and being religious, they finally went to somebody in Jammu who was known as Panditji, and he was known to have some sort of spiritual powers. And the way they describe it is that they went, and lots of people would come on the weekend to meet this Panditji, and he would choose one amongst the crowd which would sit in the courtyard. And that particular day, he chose my mother. He asked his wife to bring that woman in a blue sari. And he would sit in a little nook, which was like his mandir, and there would be a big image of Durga. So he would sit there and he asked my mother to focus and meditate on Durga. And though my mother is the Durga devotee, most people from the Jammu region are, she couldn't bring up an image in her head of Durga. So she said it took her an hour. So probably she was very distracted, not very sure of what was happening. And then finally she got this image, and then the Panditji said, everything will be fine. This pregnancy you'll carry to term, and just keep meditating and praying to Durga, and gave her something, maybe some sort of medicinal herb. But I feel that the way he conveyed to her, she was reassured that this is going to be a safe pregnancy and it'll be fine. So when I was born and later when I was told this story, I always felt I was special in the sense that I felt, oh, Durga had a hand in, my birth. So I always felt very protected by her. So even during my teenage years, when I was traveling across India because of college and going to places far away from home for studying, I always felt that she was there with me. So I would always invoke her if I felt unsafe or unsure, and I always thought that, yes, I'm daughter of Durga. So this I kept telling myself. So it's like a repetitive prayer that you say.
Yeah.
So truly believed it and felt very special, and I rubbed it in always to my younger brother, that you're not the special one, I'm the special one. So yeah, that's the personal story.
Lovely. So when it comes to then like that sort of gender imbalance that people talk about in families, how was it for you with your brother growing up?
Quite the opposite, actually. I feel sorry for him because I think, especially in Jammu region, such is the fabric of Jammu region. I mean, I was recently listening to an interview, and the local was saying that, "Yahan Devi rehti hai." This is the land of the Devi. As everybody knows, you have Vaishno Devi. She resides in Jammu region. Most of the towns or cities have a presiding deity who's also supposed to be the protecting deity of that particular town and city. So it's very much in our, not just in our belief system, but even in our behavior, where the feminine divine is revered. And her manifestation is seen in girls and especially daughters. So in a typical Jammu Dogra household, the daughters are never asked to touch the elders' feet, which is a common practice and a very beautiful practice. But in Jammu, they're not allowed to do that. No daughter is asked to do that. And I give you another very random incident, which I also talk about in my book. This was many years ago when my daughter was 6 or 7 years old, and I was shopping in one of the oldest bazaars of Jammu called Raghunath Bazaar. It gets its name because of the temple that is there, Raghunath Mandir. And a random stranger comes up to me, and my daughter Anjika was with me, and he just says that it's Tuesday, aaj Devi ka din hai. Can I just offer her this prasad, because it's part of Shakti Upasana. So I said, of course. So with my permission, he actually touched my daughter's feet and gave her a little prasad of halwa and kala chana and puri and a 10 rupees note. So that is the kind of behavior even in the society. Such is the status of women, and such is the respect for Shakti. And then that Shakti is seen not just as the goddess we pray to, but also, she's seen as being manifested in every little girl, in every daughter. She's seen manifested.
Yes. You're talking a lot about dharmic philosophy and how these ideas permeate through dharmic philosophy, but why is that relevant here and now in the UK to a non-Hindu young girl? Tell me what it is about these ideas that could help us here and now in this socio-political, geographical context.
I think it's even more important here because what the West lacks is the centuries-old philosophy which we have. And that philosophy in itself is complete and it's beautiful. So which woman, be it of any race or any religion, which woman wouldn't want to hear that you are a goddess? You can do anything, you can be anything, and the kind of fluidity of roles. So you can be an Annapurna who's feeding the family. You can be a Parvati who is a perfect partner to Shiva. You can be a Durga who can fight wars in any situation that comes across. So she can switch between these different roles, and then she's being told that you can be everything. There is no such thing as Kanya Pujan, which we have in our dharmic practices, where the woman is being celebrated. And though there is this whole extreme left lobby which says, you're making women to be goddesses, so you're not keeping her experiences real, but I think that's quite, there is a lot of fallacy to it, because the woman here, when she's being celebrated, she's also being amplified. She is being recognized, and she doesn't have to reduce herself or to be like a man to be powerful, because the very construct of power is Shakti for in our dharmic philosophy. So she doesn't have to change. I don't have to be like a man. Our philosophy says that you're an equal. In fact, they have put the woman in a higher position, because in even the Mahavakyas, like when we say Matridevo Bhava, it comes before Pitridevo Bhava. When we say Yatra Narayastu Pujayante Tatra Ramante Devata, that wherever she is worshipped, that's where the Devatas reside. And where she is not worshipped, in fact, the full sentence goes like, where she is not worshipped or recognized, even the noblest of deeds will not fructify. So imagine a daughter, let me also, because I see some daughters here. So even for a daughter, it says that if you have, if you're bringing up a daughter, it is equivalent to bringing up 10 sons. So it is so empowering. Which woman of any race or religion wouldn't want to hear this and be celebrated and told that, you're free to live the way you want to and you're powerful?
Yes, of course. Who wouldn't? The book is so deeply rooted in Jammu. Tell us a little bit, without giving away too much of the book, tell us a little bit about those Shakti shrines that exist within the Jammu region. Who are they dedicated to? What are the stories behind them? And I think what would be really helpful for some people in the audience who haven't been to the area, haven't seen these shrines, what is the experience of visiting these sites and shrines?
This question I could answer in my sleep, because I'm always talking about Jammu and Kashmir, and especially my region, Jammu. And let me begin with telling you that a marker of a Dogra, my community, is you have to A, like Rajma and Chawal. And second, when you are, especially in Jammu city, because Jammu is a very confusing name. People think it's just a city, but it's actually a district, a city, as well as a very large province with 10 districts within it. So when you come to Jammu city, how we identify locals from non-locals is that there are these parallel bridges running across river Tavi. Tavi, you must have heard from Jammu Tavi station. The actual name is Suryaputri, of the ancient, and the real name for that river is Suryaputri. So you have these bridges over Suryaputri river, and all the locals who live there, and you'll see them bobbing their heads in the direction of this lovely hillock, on top of which rests, there is a fort within which there is this mandir of Mahakali, Bave Wali Mata, as she's known as, and she's supposed to be the presiding deity of Jammu city. I mean, I can give you anecdotes of 62 and 71 wars where they believe that Jammu city was not bombed because the Pakistani Air Force fighter planes couldn't see the city. They only saw fog, and there was a little girl wearing red and walking in with a diya. And this is vouchsafed, or even when this story was being told to me, there were like 4 veterans, army veterans, from Major General to brigadiers to somebody who had won the Veer Chakra also. So even these veterans believe in that. So such is the land. You will find Shakti everywhere. It's the land of Shakti and Shiva, of course. But you'll find Shakti everywhere, and especially these Shakti shrines. There are so many of them. Sukrala Mata, Sarthal, Bhavewali Mata, Chichi Mata. In Basoli, if you go to this beautiful Chandi temple, it is on top of the hills. There are only forests around. And it's very quiet. So you can actually be not just one with the nature, but you can be one with Devi also. So when you reach these temples on top of these hills, all you see is these aqua blue lakes around. This is the Ranjit Sagar lakes. And beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So most of our Devis reside in these mountains amongst, pine forests. And so when you make that travel, when you make that trek to these temples, you really shed off everything. That is the real yatra, right? Because you do that penance of walking for hours to reach to the temple. Some are, of course, not as difficult as maybe Vaishno Devi, but very beautiful. So in pristine settings, these temples are. So definitely I would, sort of encourage everyone to come to Jammu region and see these Shakti shrines, and there are more. In fact, there are datis also. There are clan deities and village deities also.
Yes. Well, I think I'm halfway to becoming a Dogra because I love Rajma Chawal.
Yes. You are one bit.
Just talking about datas, you mentioned these local folk deities. what I found really interesting about what you mentioned in the book is that some of these deities are just honoring extraordinary people from the area, yet the locals put them on such an elevated status and almost worship them ahead of or above the Hindu pantheon gods. What does that say about a culture that can elevate its local people above their own gods? Like, that's such an interesting and unique concept outside of India. What does it say about that, about the people of the area and about the culture in general?
Yeah, and I think the practice of worshipping, not just worshipping, but having these clan deities and village deities is maybe not peculiar to Jammu region. I know I've heard of datis or such deities in Rajasthan, in southern India, in many places. But it's an amazing concept. I mean, you couldn't say more about the beauty of dharmic philosophy, where the lines between humanity and divinity is so porous. You know, today is Ram Navami, and there is this, you must have heard, Ramo Bhutva Ramam Yajit, that as you worship Ram, you become Ram. So that is so porous that in our Shastras, they say that if they encourage you to acquire divine-like qualities, and they say that you can become divine, and that's why the avatars, of course. So they say you can become divine if you inculcate these divine qualities. And datis especially, we have datas also, who are the male folk deities, but the female folk deities in Jammu region are more in number. The datis are truly women who were ordinary women, and they became extraordinary because of the things they did. So either there was some act of renunciation or some sort of a supreme sacrifice which happened, which she did. And it is a credit to the dharma in the land, as well as the local community, the local society, that these experiences, which was centered on women, people didn't let it go. People made them, or rather institutionalized these stories, and what could have been unheard of or people would have forgotten, they still remember. So she's been deified. So an ordinary woman, by some act of, I'll give you an example so that it becomes easy. Bua Bhaga is one of the datis or the clan deities in Bilawar. This is in Kathua district. It's up in the mountains. We get a little snowfall there as well. Very beautiful area. And Bua Bhaga was someone who was an activist. And I especially, when I heard of her, I was like, I was looking for female icons within my own region, women I could relate to and identify more easily. So Bua Bhaga was an activist who actually was somebody who was owning land, and she even had a little, she had help at the farm, and these were members from the Dalit Samaj, and she used to take care of them, to take care of her fields, and then the local Raja comes and says he increases the taxes, she protests against the taxes, then the Raja comes in, sends his men, they hold her Dalit workers, they capture them, keep them confined somewhere, she goes and fights, releases them, and she actually, while fighting with these soldiers, she gives up her life. And then there is a lot of, there is a sense of great penance that, something wrong has been done to this woman, we shouldn't have done that. And that's when they say, we will always remember her. So they make this mandir in her name, and she has become the clan deity of that particular clan, which did this misdeed against her. So some would say, you do something wrong to a woman and then you do this, but no. That was not the case. It was almost, when I started thinking of the datis, I realized it's also a sort of a reminder that do not do this to women. Do not do this, or respect what they have done, what their supreme sacrifice has been. So this is what the dati culture is, and my village also has a Gram Devi, and how they sort of become, when you said higher than your, the other known gods, it's only because people relate to her more. It's like she's my village deity. She knows what's happening in my village. She knows that the harvest this time has not been good. So she, I can go and talk to her about these little things. So I'll go to Shiva when there is some major problem. But if I have my minor problems, like, or I'm happy, I have to share my joys, my daughter is getting married, or she's not getting married, or my son is not doing well, I will talk to my village Devi, my Gram Devi, because she knows me so well. And this Gram Devi also, I found interestingly, so supposing the Khajuria clan, It's moved all across the world and in India. So every annual mail that happens, everybody comes from different parts of the country especially, and abroad as well, and they meet. So she's that matriarch who is holding the clan together. She's not only wishing prosperity, but she's also holding them together because they keep coming and meeting in these mails. So a very, very powerful part of the Jammu, I would say the dharmic fabric of Jammu, these datis are.
Yes. Listening to you, I feel like everyone in your region must be so aware of all of this, yet in your book you say that you were also a victim of the Indian education system. I've written exactly what you wrote. You said the Indian education system has remained enslaved to the idea of Western superiority and has failed to inculcate its indigenous knowledge systems. So what do you mean by that? It seems that this is you know this, as you said, you can narrate these stories in your sleep. Isn't everyone in India able to do that?
No, I think it took a lot of research for me to find out about, because my book also talks about warrior princesses who are part of the Jammu's history. So forget the women warriors. I don't think people outside the state know about the male warriors also. Very few know, maybe except for General Zorawar Singh or some of these warriors. So our education system was a victim to this whole colonization, and we must study a particular kind of history. Some of the things were brushed aside. So it's not just about Jammu region's heroes or heroines not being known, but across India, we didn't know about the Ahoms. We didn't know about so many kingdoms who were actually victorious. So sometimes I feel it was by design, or rather now we know that it was by design, because we've heard the victim stories of Hindus, but we haven't heard about the victors. And that plays a very big part in your psyche. Because if you don't hear of how your people have won and have strived and stayed on, and lived and thrived, then you do not have an example to follow. There is no legacy. So I think it was very purposeful. So even the datis I mentioned or the Shakti shrines I mentioned, they were not very easily known. And in fact, some of the datis, when I was doing my research, and I did a lot of my research even online, I used the platforms that I am active on and asked people to tell me the story of their datis. So many young people came back and said, I know this is my dati, this is where I go, but I don't know her story. This story was known to my dada, my grandfather, but it's gone now. Because these are small shrines, sort of, all across the Jammu region, so they don't know the story because they have not documented it, which also became very important for me to, the reason to document this. So this is we were a victim of the education system because we weren't taught about our heroes and our heroines. So I would probably, I went to a missionary school, and I probably would know Joan of Arc, but I wouldn't know some other queen from Indian history. So that's why I mentioned that.
Yeah, so this book is definitely a starting point into that unlearning or relearning in a way.
Definitely.
So it's interesting, you're mentioning a lot about like nature and primitive ideas, and even one of your chapters is called The Need to Deconstruct Goddesses, Primitive or Progressive. And I thought that was a very interesting title, and the chapter itself, it makes me wonder why we need to pit the idea of progress against primitive. Our culture at large is, we worship rivers, lakes, mountains, our food, we worship each other, we worship ourselves. So how do we go about rejecting this narrative and also shaking it off and turning it on its head, this narrative that primitive equals regressive?
I mean, even the word primitive is not our word. So I think the words like primitive, exotic. I also did there was this a sort of a webinar which I was invited to. This was being done by a university in Jammu. And they called it a discussion on cults, Shakti cults. So this word cult, these are not our words. I mean, primitive is a word which was given to us by the Westerners who came in. And they are the ones who call it exotic and primitive and cult and, and I earlier used to think that it was probably because they couldn't understand. So they didn't understand, so there was contempt or there was reduction of it. But now I think it was purposeful.